Good evening and welcome to the Durham District School Board SEAC Special Education Advisory Committee for December 2022. We're excited this evening to welcome a number of new members. We'll begin with the call to order and a reading of the Durham District School Board Land Acknowledgement. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and our schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississauga-Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, learn, and live. Our commitment is also to Indigenous rights and human rights. The Durham District School Board recognizes Indigenous rights are distinct. In the exercise of those rights, Indigenous staff and students shall not be subjected to actions with the aim or effect of depriving these distinct rights. The Durham District School Board is committed to learning and working environments that center human rights and equity and are safe, welcoming, respectful, equitable, accessible, inclusive, and free from discrimination. We will now do our roll call. And so if I could, I will just share the 3 regrets this evening. So we have regrets from Eva Kyriakides, representative for the Association for Bright Children. Regrets from Rowan Jarvis, representative for the Learning Disabilities Association of Durham Region. And Kathy Keddy, representative for Voice for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Children. Kathy's had a weather impact her power. She's hoping that she gets her power restored and is able to join us through the meeting. So with that, may I have our 2 trustee representatives introduce themselves, please?
Hi, I'm Deb Oldfield, trustee elected out of City of Oshawa, but represent all of Durham District Board.
Hi, I am Kelly Miller. I am representing Ajax Community.
Thank you. Autism Ontario?
Sensorina Peer present.
Durham Down Syndrome Association?
Tara Cully present.
Early Years Consortium? Oh, I think we may have lost Vera. Easter Seals Ontario?
Anna Nguyen for Easter Seals Ontario.
And I'm sorry, Carissa. Do you want to introduce the new name?
Hi, yes, I'm Carissa Lewis, and I'm representing the Black Parent Support Group. I don't fully know the new name by her yet.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Do you have it written there, Andrea?
I do. If that's okay, would you like me to mention that at this time?
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So SEAC members will note that in the correspondence, we did receive a letter in changing the name of one of the SEAC associations. And the item is noted under your correspondence in tonight's agenda, but we're going to draw attention to it here so that we can accurately reflect this within our meeting. And Chris, you'll correct me if I'm incorrect, as I am learning as well. Sabona Afrocentric Circle of Support, which I believe when I did some reading is around Circle of Care. And so quite beautiful. That was very touching. And I know, Jen, did you want to speak to that as well? Your mic's off.
Sorry, I apologize. I just got onto the call. What was the question? We were just
highlighting the beautiful renaming of your association.
Yes, it has been renamed from Black Parent Support Group to Sabonka.
That's quite beautiful. Thank you. And both of you are welcome. Just clarifying that when we get to votes, the association has 1 vote within the election. Okay, thank you. And then we go to our 2 members at large, and I'll start with Morgan.
And Morgan Cameron.
And so Morgan is joining us new to SEAC, so welcome Morgan, and Elizabeth Daniels.
Hi there, I'm Elizabeth Daniel, and this time I'm joining as member at large.
Thank you. And then I will go to our two administrator reps, please. Anthony, if you don't mind, start and then pass it to your colleague.
Yeah, Anthony Phelan. I'm the representative for the Durham Secondary Administrators.
And Rima Sati, representative for elementary panel.
Thank you. And we always have the pleasure of a membership leader from with Inclusive Student Services. And it's my pleasure to be able to work alongside our mental health leader. And over to you, Steph.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie. I'm the mental health lead here at the school board. Nice to be here.
Thank you so much. So thank you so much for all the adjustments that you would have made with the weather to be in a good spot to log on this evening. Greatly appreciate all of you being here. Oh, sorry, Donna. I would also like to recognize Trustee Donna Edwards. We will note that at the last the meeting of the board, which was the organizational meeting, Donna was elected chair of the board and has agreed to continue her commitment to SEAC as one of the two alternates trustees to SEAC as well. So Donna, congratulations, and thank you for your longstanding and continuing commitment around the SEAC table. May I have approval of the agenda? So I would need someone to motion and someone to second, please. Thank you, Tara. Seconder. Thank you, Hannah. All in favor? Okay. And is there any questions around the minutes from the November 10th meeting? And if not, may I have a mover? Thank you, Elizabeth. Seconded. Terry, okay. Thank you. And in approval. Okay. So now we will move into elections. So there are two elected positions within SEAC, and they are, the positions do come from the voting position members. So those of us that are staff support are not eligible to vote, as well as the Early Years Consortium seat is a non-voting seat on SEAC as well. So both of our trustee representatives carrying votes, as well as all of the association reps, as well as the members at large. We now put before you an election process. So voting is 50% plus one. I have 8 in attendance, so it would take 5 to pass a motion. What we will do is call for nominations for chair. That will stand through 3 rounds of calling. So it'll be a call for the nomination of the chair, second call, and third call from the floor. At that point, we will either vote and or have an acclaimed chair, and then that chair will take over the meeting and or ask for assistance, and we'll do the exact same process for vice chair. Before we move into that process, is there any questions for clarification of members that would be helpful to you? Okay, so seeing none, may I ask that staff just go camera off for a minute for my own, so I can see hands easier. Sorry about that. That would be very helpful, and then we'll welcome you back in a minute. So calling for nominations for the chair of SEAC for 2023. Are there any nominations from the floor? Tara?
Sorry, I have to go off mute there. I'm nominating Eva Kyriakides in absentia.
Thank you, and I will confirm that Eva had offered that if her name was to come forward, that she would accept a nomination. So thank you for that, Tara. Calling for any further nominations for chair. And calling 1/3 time for any nominations for chair of SEAC for 2023. Seeing none, Eva has been declared chair for SEAC for 2023. As Eva was not able to join us this evening, is SEAC okay if I proceed with election of a vice chair? Okay, seeing no opposition, calling for nomination of a vice chair for SEAC for 2023. Calling a second time for nominations for Vice Chair of SEAC for 2023.
Question.
Yes, Chair.
I'm so sorry. I should have asked this earlier. Can you nominate yourself? That
I believe
seems
so.
not.
I believe you can.
Or I am willing to nominate Tara Cully.
Thanks, Liz.
So we have a nomination of Tara Cully. Tara, do you accept the nomination?
Sure. Sounds good.
Thank you. And putting out a third call for Vice Chair of SEAC for the 2023 school year. Seeing no further nominations, Tara, you're acclaimed as Vice Chair of SEAC for 2023. Thank you for standing in that position.
Thank you.
Tara, are you comfortable if at this point I then turn the meeting over to you to chair?
Oh, shoot. I forgot I had to do this now, didn't I? Right.
All right. Is that okay? Are you okay?
Yeah, that's fine. That is fine.
I'm good
Like-
either way. You know that, right? Okay.
I know. It's like riding a bike, isn't it? Yeah.
I'm like, you can ask for staff support if you'd like, but I also have full confidence in your.
All right. Well, it might be a little bumpy. It's been a while, but we can do that.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay. Is there anything else that we've got to handle for that? We are good.
You're now at number 8.
We're number 8. So moving on to staff reports. We'll start with the administration report.
Thank you. So our administration report tonight begins with appreciation for the valuable SEAC feedback that SEAC continues to provide into our programs and services. Your insights, knowledge, and generosity of time are always greatly appreciated. Our inclusive student services teams continue to learn and shift practices, both in regards to special education and mental health, as we learn to support identity affirming mental health and well-being practices for students through a variety of approaches. Our teams, as well as those of us that lead them, understand that no one strategy or training is the answer, but rather a comprehensive and critical thinking approach. Each December, all directors of education report back to trustees, the ministry, and community through a publication of what's called the Annual Director's Report. The Durham District School Board Annual Report was recently shared by Director Marsh with the Board of Trustees. A copy of that report will be shared with all SEAC members, and we welcome any follow-up inquiries as part of our January SEAC meeting. Within the report, SEAC members will find reference to the Durham District School Board Special Education Plan and the practice shifts specifically embedded within it. As a district, we recognize the talents, gifts, and abilities of each of the students within our schools. The intersectional identities that each student arrives with are to be celebrated and amplified as a means of validating the richness of their experience and valuing and honoring their whole self. The Durham District School Board Special Education Plan was revised to actively challenge ableism and the traditional focus on the medical model of diagnosis and/or deficit, and is intentionally positioned to start our shift in practices of inclusion to an asset-based approach. This work is very complex. It is our commitment to our students as we continually unlearn and learn to grow in our service and support. Director Marsh has been a steadfast advocate for all students, champion of changing foundations that are critical to shifting practice, such as our district commitments, as well as an advocate for public education. Nora has had a career in amplifying the gifts of all students, their joy, their learning, and their well-being. Today, Nora presented as part of a director's panel at a provincial conference of school mental health leaders that Stephanie and I attended. Nora shared our district actions to be responsive to students, staff, and community policy into practice as we individualize learning and hold ourselves accountable to our communities. In January, we will welcome Director Camille Williams-Taylor to continue leading us in the important work. Previous to Camille's current role as director of the Ottawa Carleton School Board, Camille led inclusive student services in the Durham District School Board, including support to SEAC. We look forward to welcoming Camille as a guest at SEAC as part of her transition to her new director role here. For our members that are new around the table, there is a guidance document called PAC on SEAC that has recommended information items timely for us to bring each month. And so in this month of December, the 2 recommended action items are any plan changes to special education programs for the upcoming school year, as well as to begin the special education plan consultation. So we want to reinforce that feedback on these items is both invited and welcomed, with invitation for input or conversation. Our teams have already begun planning for the 23-24 school year. We continue to be a district responsive to student needs in the provision of a range of programs which are outcomes focused and foster independence and pathway options. There are no significant changes to the model planned at this time. In January, our school teams and our inclusive student services teams will be connecting with students and families to begin planning at an individual student level. Updates for SEAC will be woven through the months ahead. Suggested for our open discussion period in February, to be decided by our chair and vice chair, SEAC provides important consultation on the special education plan for the subsequent school year. With many new members to SEAC since consultation on the plan last winter, our department report in January will provide background on the requirements for the plan and our foundations of programs and services in Durham. We want you to be able to provide consultation and feedback with confidence on the foundations. We currently in Durham, and I will post these in a moment in the chat box so that you've got the exact numbers. We have 14,811 students active to one or more services. 12,454 students whose programs are based on individual education plans, of which 2,533 students access programming through special education placement. That's 98 students additional to last year as we opened a number of new classes. And again, I'll post these in the chat box so that you have the exact number. With referrals from all teams and appreciating that a number of students are open to multiple services, Inclusive Student Services currently is active with 20,254 student referrals currently active. Our referral rates, particularly for mental health, continue to increase. We are fortunate to have DDSB mental health leader Stephanie Pollibor, who will provide overview on the mental health and action plan tonight, and a highlight of our January district focus on attunement. It is important to note that as a district this January, we moved to a theme of let's listen, moving away from the corporate focus of Bell Let's Talk today. It is through feedback from our students, the experience of our teams, and research on foundational mental health strategies that we know relationships center our work in well-being and mental health. It is key to listen and learn from one another and lean in within caring school community that foster everyday conditions for well-being and are responsive to those who need individualized supports. Stephanie's presentation will bring further context, and questions related specifically to mental health are requested to be held, as our presentation may answer some of those. And then finally, as 2022, soon in 2 weeks, draws to a close, our Inclusive Student Services teams are appreciative of each member of SEAC and the voices that you bring in informing our work and our privilege of supporting students. We thank you for another year of collaborative service to our joint community. That is our administrative report. Happy to take any questions, and I will post those numbers in the chat box.
Thank you, Andrea. Anyone have any questions on the administration report? Kelly? Oh, still on mute, Kelly. Nope.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm not sure what happened. I lost my screen there. There we go. Okay, so I just wanted to ask Andrea the name of the conference that she attended. I didn't get the name of it.
Oh, sorry, thank you. So Stephanie and I are supported by an organization called School Mental Health Ontario, which is a provincial group that is supportive to boards in mental health. And occasionally through the year, we have regional meetings, but occasionally there is a provincial conference of the superintendents with mental health responsibilities, as well as the mental health leaders, such as Stephanie. And so it was that conference today, drawing from all the districts across the province.
Awesome, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking.
Any other questions for the administration report? Nope, seeing none. All right, then on to the board report.
And Carol, sorry, I asked staff to camera off and they've stayed camera off, so their choice to camera back on. I apologize.
Yep, no, please do. Please do. Deb, Kelly, this is usually this place where you would bring forward information from the last board meeting that you felt would be appropriate or impactful or applicable for SEAC to share.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I just wanted to update. Thank you for welcoming us into the SEAC today, and I'm looking forward to connecting with you all. Representing the board, I just wanted to first bring everyone up to date in where we are currently. We were inaugurated, all of our trustees, on November the 15th. So we have a new board of trustees with a returning trustee who is now chair, Donna Edwards, as alternate member on SEAC. We held our organizational meeting on December the 4th. And I'm just going to give a brief overview of the positions that we currently hold right now. So various positions, we had election, and these are our positions. Chair of the Board of Trustees, we have Donna Edwards. Vice Chair of the Board of Trustees, Christine Thatcher. Chair of the Committee of the Whole, standing, Christine Thatcher. Vice Chair, Committee of the Whole, Standing Committee, Emma Cunningham. Chair of Education and Finance Committee, Carolyn Morton. Vice Chair, Education Finance Committee, Linda Stone. Chair of Governance and Policy Committee, Tracy Brown. Vice Chair of Governance and Policy Committee, Shailene Penelio. So currently for SEAC, as myself, Kelly Wheeler, and of course, Deb Oldfield, and our alternates for SEAC is Donna Edwards and Linda Stone. Going forward, we did have a report for the health that is going, you will find that in the report section for the board. You'll find that we had a health and safety measures update, and that has been put in the report. So that is for discussing what is the current recommendations for classrooms in terms of ventilation, health, so forth. And that's pretty much it. I'm looking forward to getting more familiar with you. I had a lovely chance of meeting Andrea already. So thank you so much for inviting me into the board meeting.
And I was just going to add to that. I also sit on OPSPA, so I wanted to update on the meeting we had. So OPSPA met at the end of November, and one of the things that I thought might be of interest was the NANOS poll that they had done. There were a couple of questions in there that I thought might be interesting to this committee. One of the things that when they were polling, they found that the people that responded felt that more funding for special education programs, which help students with behavioral, communication, intellectual, and physical needs, 50% felt it was important, 38% felt it was somewhat important. So, 88% fell in somewhat to important category, which is good. The other one that I wanted to mention was that they felt 55% felt it was important, 36% felt it was somewhat important, that there was more funding for school boards to ensure schools are accessible for individuals with disabilities. So I have the full poll results. So I can actually, maybe I could send it a link so that it could be provided in the minutes. That might be the easiest thing.
That would be appreciated, Deb, if you want to send them to Lisa. She'll include them in the correspondence. Lisa's role is very similar to Kathy's.
Okay.
In terms of your schema for what you're becoming used to with board.
But I just wanted to highlight those two, but there's some other interesting information in the poll results. The other thing was, it was the advocacy day for OPSPA, and I was able to, along with Trustee Cunningham, we met with Patrice Barnes and Jennifer French, and I happened to have the letter from SEAC that was sent to the Minister of Education regarding the SIP funding, and along with the priorities that OPSPA had highlighted for us to speak to them on. I did provide them, although I know Patrice was copied on it. I'm not sure if they, if they see their correspondence or not, but anyways, she was provided with another copy of that letter, as well as Jennifer French, and we had conversations around the funding shortfall. So that was good timing. And I'm really looking forward to working with the committee, and expect that it will be a very large learning curve for me, but I'm excited to do it.
Great. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Kelly. Anyone have any questions for our trustees on the board report? Seeing none. Okay, then let's move on to our inclusive student services.
I had a question. I just was a bit slow on the update.
Slow on the update. Sorry, Hannah, go ahead.
No problem. So I'm wondering, Kelly and Deb, I know in the past we can try to find the board reports. Do you think this time around, or in this new school year, that we can they be included in our documents, similar to asking Lisa to kind of include other documents for us? I think it would be really helpful. I do find it difficult to kind of go in and search it. And if it's possible, having a one-stop shop or package for SEAC would be great. Maybe that's more of an Andrea question or Lisa question.
I'm sorry, we absolutely can put the links directly into the package, maybe as a standing item on the bottom of the agenda, if that would suit.
Yeah, that would be great.
Great. Anyone else? No? All right. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Kelly. All right, moving on. Item number 9 in the Inclusive Student Services Department report.
All right, everyone, I'm going to share the Inclusive Services Department report, and then I'm going to move into the Mental Health Action Plan report. So when I present, unless I figure out how to be a little bit more technologically savvy, I can't see the chat box nor people. So if it's okay with everyone, I'm going to go through the entire presentation and then open the floor for some feedback and questions. Okay. Okay. Rehard. So I really want to thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of the amazing work that's happening across Inclusive Student Services Department. To talk a little bit about a lunch and learn that's happening. I'm going to highlight some school-based rehabilitative services and some learning that's going on. And as I said earlier, I'm going to wrap that up with sharing with you some details about the Mental Health Wellbeing Action Plan. So a lot of great things are happening across our schools, and it's often hard to choose what is one great thing. But I'm going to highlight what's happening at EB Finn, where they brought teachers together on their lunch break to spend some time together learning about structured teaching. And this is just a good picture that was shared on social media. As a system, we are so appreciative of our classroom support staff. We know they play such a vital role in the care and support of our students. And on our Classroom Support Staff Appreciation Day, we're very happy to recognize the effort and the role that they play every single day for our students across our schools. School-based rehabilitative services. Grandview is, as the local child treatment center, is partnered across Durham region with 6 local district school boards, with the DDSB being the largest. School-based rehabilitative services division partners with DDSB to provide suggestions and support around occupational therapy, physical therapy, program supports that provide essential access to curriculum and curricular programming. Grandview's occupational therapist and physical therapist are valued partners and consultants to our school teams. And continue with that, as of this time, our partners with our school-based rehabilitative services, like most primary care and service sectors, are experiencing staffing and service pressures. They've also acknowledged previously highlighted information around the increasing numbers of students we jointly serve and support. On November 18, we had a very exciting day of learning for educational assistants where they were all given opportunities in lots of different learning venues to take some time to invest in their own professional learning. The next two slides highlight some of the areas of learning that were really well attended sessions. We talked about the practical use and application of Google Suite of programs with a lens on inclusive education supports for students. There was a full behavior management systems training sessions as well as a half-day refresher. Grandview joined us in their OTs and PTs. They partnered to offer lift and transfer training where they worked with EAs to review and practice the most efficient, safest, and ergonomically correct way to use mechanical lift systems and perform manual lifts. Our speech and language services offered several different sessions around the use of augmented alternative communication systems such as LAMP, which is an AAC program, and that helped to orient and center our EA staff around the use of systems and how students can better use them, even better to access their voice. And we had a team of child and youth workers that were providing Tier 1 mental health and well-being resources. What are those everyday practices within a school that support students to feel welcome, understood, and have a sense of feeling like they belong and they're welcomed. We also provided Safe Talk. Safe Talk is a half-day training on how to invite a conversation around folks specific to the theme of suicide. And here are some of the others in terms of understanding when a situation might be reportable to CAS, and you'll see social learning and emotional regulation curriculum was also shared. The next two slides are specific to special education and additional qualifications, and I'm actually going to hand that to Andrea just to speak to.
Thank you. So often our ministry will provide us with very specific additional funds. So I equate it to, I'm going to date myself, but when you're growing up and your allowance goes on an envelope or cash and you can only spend it for what the subject or focus is for that. So the ministry provides us with funding, and we're thrilled that in one of those bundles for this year, it's funding to support teachers in accessing formalized coursework with the faculty. So when a teacher finishes a Bachelor of Education, they can engage in further qualifications that go on their teacher record cards with Ontario College of Teachers. And so we've received funding for the next 3 years, which is also really great as teachers can engage in a series of learning to support inclusive programming for students. So on this slide, you see single session courses to support students. And then Steph, if you don't mind going to the next slide. A lot of the qualifications are tiered as part 1, part 2, and a specialist. So it would be taken over 3 terms. And you see a number of those listed. We have done a gap analysis as a district, and we do know that we are low in needing to build the repertoire of staff that have qualifications and skills specific to supporting our students with either vision, hearing, or vision and hearing needs. And so while these credits are funded at a maximum of $650 per credit, those that have stars or asterisks on screen, we're more than happy to fund the full cost of the course. So the educator would engage in the learning, complete the course, and then there's a quick link and submission of confirmation of completion and which they'll be reimbursed for the course fee. So timing with SEAC is great. The information went out to all permanent, all occasional teachers in the district today who are in long-term occasional placements, because we wanted to do both our permanent staff and those invested in our kids in long-term placements. And so that is now available. There are also math subsidies, as well as a subsidy for the Indigenous rights learning course as well around Indigenous education. So lots of robust learning opportunities for staff to avail themselves of.
Great, thanks, Andrea. And the last slide for the department report is the save the date for the DDSB Abilities Track and Field Meet. For those that have not been part of it, it is an absolutely joy-filled day to watch our kids do their very best at track and field event and watch them excel, watch the joy, watch so much positive energy between students and staff. It really is a powerfully moving day. I went last year and I'm speaking from that experience, and I can still feel how amazing that experience was. So save the date, Friday, June 16th. It's at the Oshawa Civic Fields. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about our mental health and well-being action plan that is intended to guide us for the next 3 years. And I just thank you for the opportunity to join you and being able to share some of our thinking. Here at the DDSB, what makes the role of the mental health leader and my support of the system and the work of inclusive student services around the topic of promoting mental health and well-being, one that we can really step into is the fact that the DDSB is committed to cultivating the conditions for a healthy learning and working environment where all of our students and staff feel welcomed, where students in particular are engaged in school life, both in the classroom and in the larger school, where they are valued and seen and heard, where their identities affirm, where they belong, they know that they matter, and they're connected to adults that care and are present to their lived realities. And that is powerful for learning. And such, this plan, it works in and support of and aligned to the district operational goals specific to student learning and well-being. Because this plan recognizes that good mental health and well-being are foundational to a student's success in the classroom and to a thriving school environment. The process and directions that are set out in the plan that I'm going to share with you came about through the work of an interdepartmental multidisciplinary team that relied heavily on feedback-informed development to establish key actions for the plan, ensuring that the plan and the planning process was responsive to student and staff and system needs, that it was staff and student centered, identity affirming, differentiated, and responsive, that it was also implementation sensitive with attention paid to the plan being scalable and sustainable, and that it was aligned to our system commitments and priorities grounded in the foundational anchors of Indigenous rights, human rights, equity, and inclusion. If we could summarize the action plans within this mental health and well-being action plan, it would be learn, support, connect. We believe it's important to learn how we can support the everyday mental health and well-being of our students and staff. And we commit to provide for our students and staff inclusive, identity affirming, culturally relevant supports as needed. And we strive to connect all students and staff to, from, and through the pathways for those supports. This image here is the plan. And this plan provides for us a template for actioning of those key priority areas with the development of specific action plans that will be informed, developed, revised, monitored as a result of critical conversations and intentional listening to students, to family, to staff, and to community partners, leading to our collective learning and unlearning as a district. Now, this plan does acknowledge that we all come with our own mental health journey. You know, I'm thinking about Andrea's numbers. I think when we think, and I think we're painfully aware that the percentage of students who may struggle with a mental health challenge is somewhere around 1 in 5. And in the majority of our classrooms, that could be anywhere from 5 to 6 students. And in some of our smaller classrooms, it could be more. And we acknowledge the reality that many of our students and staff are navigating challenges and risk factors that may compromise their mental health and well-being. This plan was constructed with an appreciation that the needs for direct intervention far outpace the available resources by trained staff. This is true for our district. It's also true for our community. And we do have trained mental health staff who provide the mental health supports and services that you see under support to strengthen. We do have trained staff that support navigating those strong pathways to, from, and through mental health supports. They're a small portion of the entire 10,000 plus staff. So the plan doesn't ignore that. It does, however, acknowledge that mental health is health, that mental health is not the absence of mental illness in the same way that physical health is not the absence of disease. We all have mental health, all 5 out of 5 students, all 5 out of 5 staff. And this plan leverages all staff, not just the mental health trained staff. It leverages all staff in support of all students. And I think this is what will truly make a difference to support student mental health and well-being, because in the same way we would approach physical health as a school district, you think about the example of promoting heart health or the prevention of heart disease. We wouldn't necessarily do that by putting more nurses and doctors in the schools. Instead, we would invite every classroom teacher, every support staff, every adult in a building to invite and focus on those healthy habits. Things like healthy eating, exercise, movement, sleep, stress management, because we know those are the foundational conditions or activities that build a strong heart. The true power and impact of this plan realizes this and in turn mobilizes that power and impact of the everyday interactions students and staff can have when we all leverage every interaction and every opportunity to create school environments anchored in caring, attuned, identity-affirming relationships. These connections, our relationships, they create the anchors needed for staff and students to be seen, to feel heard, and know that they're valued. For our student to acknowledge that our district staff, we're the guardians of spaces that allow students to breathe when they're in our schools, to be themselves, to find a place where they can be vulnerable and embrace their identity as a learner, as a person. This plan, with the focus on Learn, Support, Connect, it provides us a roadmap that, when implemented, can support opportunities for all students to celebrate and develop their gifts, achieve a true sense of belonging, purpose, hope, where they can experience joy and learn the skills for their life ahead. So what does this look like in practice when we talk about these areas of learn to understand, support to strength, and connect to pathways? When we think about learn to understand, we're talking about supporting mental health literacy. What do we need to know about mental health? What do we need to know about those everyday conditions that support mental health and well-being? This is really about identity-informed, engaged learning, increasing our collective understanding of mental health and well-being, what fosters, what promotes, what bolsters mental health and well-being, and what goes into the practices at a school level, in a classroom. Everything from how we greet kids as they walk through our front doors and how we say goodbye at the end of our day, how we use every single day so that every student knows and can experience a caring adult that recognizes their lived experience, where they're affirmed, seen, heard, valued, belong, and they know that they matter. The everyday conditions that support mental health and well-being, it's about how we as caring adults are the guardian of spaces that allow students just to be. And at the core of that is ensuring students are connected to a caring adult every day, where the adults steward these safe spaces for kids to take risks, where students are surrounded by someone who knows them, who notices when something's wrong, who reaches out when they notice, who listens, make connections to support as needed, and someone who believes in them and instills hope. That relationship connection is very powerful for the 5 out of 5 students who have mental health. It's particularly powerful for the 1 in 5 that may have a mental health challenge or vulnerable towards that. And we have 10,000 staff that can be investing in that work. Support to strengthen is about staff skill building for student support, as well as our skilled staff around mental health supports and services. And this priority involves providing our students and staff inclusive, identity-affirming, culturally relevant supports and services as needed, where there's coordinated mental health prevention and early intervention programming, upskilling as needed, resourcing that's inclusive of all staff and all students, and reflects our commitments as a district. And connect to pathways to, from, and through those supports provides us an ability to focus on the right services and right supports at the right time, reflective of strengthening collaborations with students, parents, staff, and community partners to ensure the supports we offer are family-driven, involve a youth-guided planning process, and that truly meets the needs. This plan is anchored in our commitments to Indigenous rights, human rights, and equity. We are committed to creating safe, welcoming, inclusive, and respectful learning and working spaces that promote well-being for all students and staff. That's at the core of this plan. We get there by learn, support, connect, but it's anchored in human rights, Indigenous rights, equity and inclusion, relationship building and engagement, and trauma-informed practices. These are the enablers that we believe will help keep us successful in this implementation. These key enablers are also our guiding framework. They're going to hold us accountable to how we focus on promoting mental health and well-being. And it's important to note that this plan is not a staged plan. We don't first learn, then support, then connect. But rather, it's a dynamic, multi-directional, and interactive plan, building into and onto each other, dependent on one another. And this plan provides the district a template for collective commitment, for shared responsibility, for carrying a safe, welcoming, inclusive, respectful, and responsive school and work environment. This is key because the education system plays a very important role in contributing to enhanced positive mental health in our students. Promoting and supporting positive mental health and welcoming, caring, respectful environments is vital to ensure that our students remain resilient, that they can learn to be the best of their ability and achieve success in ways that matter to them and build healthy supporting relationship. This is a shared responsibility of all staff. I wanted to share with you two quick concrete examples of Learn to Understand. The first is the 5W resource. This was developed by a working group of last year's Student Senate, which was finalized at the end of last school year and followed up with a commitment that we would focus on offering and supporting getting this into the hands of our students this year. This was a handbook created by students for students, and it becomes both a resource for our students as well as staff in supporting the mental health and well-being of students, increasing both their collective mental health literacy, as well as establishing ways to create and enhance everyday conditions that support mental health and well-being. It's a way to say to students, it's okay not to be okay, and create within our schools a help-seeking environment. The second example ties to what Andrea was talking about in terms of the messaging that we're offering to our system. And so it really is grounded in the everyday conditions that support mental health and well-being. So every month we're sharing information with the system and we're bringing staff together to learn from each other, to share best practices, to create new knowledge, to advance our collective practice, and to enhance our connection to and relationships with students and each other. So the focus was in September was connection before and through curriculum. October was a focus on leveraging every opportunity, every interaction, every connection. November, we reinforced empathy being the fuel for those connections. And this month in December, we highlighted that when we leverage every interaction and our connections are fueled by empathy, we can truly see the power of relationships come to life in our schools. And those positive relationships, which form the foundational conditions that support positive mental health and well-being, require attunement. And attunement means that we engage and deal with others deeply in a manner that shows their importance to us and their relationship to us. It requires us to listen deeply, to tune in, and to respond to what our students bring forward. And this is our January focus. And on January 25, many will acknowledge Bell Let's Talk Day. The day itself has helped to highlight the need to talk about mental health. And in a decision to intentionally move away from the corporate focus of this day, we want to promote DDSB Let's Listen, appreciating that should students choose to talk, we need to ensure that we're prepared to hear them. Inviting opportunities to openly talk about mental health and well-being is a component of creating and co-constructing a welcoming, safe, respectful environment. And that requires us to listen in ways that support students to feel seen, heard, and valued, and to experience genuine connection. As caring adults, our first instinct is often to move to support, to advise, to problem solve. However, it's really important that we take a moment to pause so we can listen to understand. And when it comes to mental health, a vital step is inviting someone to talk and for that person to be truly heard. So we see this plan and the implementation of the actions embedded in this as our responsibility. And so we want to hear from you. We want to gather feedback from your perspective on what we're striving to achieve, on the impact we're hoping to have. If we were to live up to the commitment to learn, support, and connect as outlined in this plan, what would you see happening across the system? And we welcome your feedback to this question. I'm going to stop sharing at this moment so I can actually see people as we talk.
Thanks, Stephanie. Are there any questions or comments for Stephanie on any part of the presentation? We've sort of spanned 2 agenda items now in this one. So, Hannah?
Great, thanks, Tara. I don't know if anyone else wanted to go first, but thank you so much for that presentation, Stephanie, and for all the people who put that work into it. I agree with you that it's very aspirational, and it's great that when you have just kind of like keywords, right? So I think in terms of feedback, in terms of what I think is good, when it's too big, too many things, it's hard to remember, right? And this is kind of like a 3-year plan. So I think that's great. I think all of those pieces, it definitely seems very research informed, and in terms of, a sense of belonging, the elements that build resilience, the protective factors that are necessary in terms of mental health, right? So we're not using those research-based language, but really kind of everyday language, which is great, but definitely seems really good. I think the first question I have is just around how are you going to measure? What are the metrics you're using to figure out whether these are effective or not? I mean, obviously, it's great to have programming, it's great to have resources, it's great to be doing things, but I do, one of the things we want to look at it is, are we doing the right things as a school board? Are we helping I don't want to say the word is the right people, but perhaps the people, are the approaches targeting the group that we're intending to target as well? So just wonder if you can speak a little bit that to us for SEAC as we're, trying to give you feedback into it, and as well as just wondering if, once we have this information, if we'd have any other thoughts.
Thanks for that, Hannah. I think that's such an important question to ask. And I think there's multiple entry points to that question in terms of answers. One is, as an ISS department, we're always asking ourselves what impact we want to have, what impact that we're having. And so there's a lot of current activity in terms of holding ourselves accountable to what impact looks like. And that same thinking is being leveraged as we think about our mental health plan. What is the impact? And so if we had a system that really did understand, we learned to understand, we were making and creating spaces where support was being accessed, and we were connecting to, from, and through for those supports. How would we know we were being successful at that? So these are conversations that we are actually diving into right now. Part of the plan has been constructed with an orientation towards being feedback informed. So what are students telling us? And one of the questions that we're going around the system, if we were to do this, and we actually were doing this at a scale of 10 to 10, what would that look like? And we're going around the system asking for concrete feedback as a way to consider how that kind of might inform the data that we're looking for to measure movement through this plan. So that's one way. And then again, we've got a mental health steering committee that is a connection between different departments that are looking at shared oversight around that. Another part is we're kind of trying to drill down into specific actions with specific indicators. Like, what are those key performance indicators that would suggest learn to understand is taking root? We have lots of activities, and I shared a couple of them that we're going into that. How do we know that's landing? And so, Hannah, you're asking the questions that we're asking to keep ourselves accountable so that we're constantly checking in and using the feedback to ensure that this is a plan that's creating the shifts and changes that really are at the heart of this plan. I don't know if Andrew, you had any other thoughts or comments?
No, I think a very wise overview. I think one of the examples from earlier in SEAC is the number of referrals that are open and the number of students in classroom placements. That tells us where and who with, but not the impact thereof. And so, as Stephanie said, as a department, we're really digging in and seeking feedback on, so how do you know what the impact was? And then how does that inform the shift in practice to not only do well that day, but do better in future? I think historically education, particularly special education, has done a lot of what we refer to as count data. How many students, how many referrals, how many program seats. And so we're really continuing special education classes switch to that outcome promise of program. And so now we're turning that towards our services to go, what was your impact and how do you know? So figuring out how we position information from students and families to inform our work and our learning too. We know we've got a lot of unlearning and learning to do. So we want it to be in the experience and joy of the kids, but also in our professional growth as well. We're getting there. So Hannah, we don't have the model to put up, but the good questions, knowing that shifts are in progress.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's good to know, where the thinking is at and where the planning needs to be happening. And so that's great. I don't know if anyone else has any questions. I do actually have quite a few. So I want to kind of perhaps toss it back to some other people on from the other associations and members before I move to the next question.
Does anyone else have any questions? Liz, go ahead.
Yeah, just further to what Andrea was saying about the count data, you had mentioned that that the referrals for mental health support and people accessing the mental health programs are increasing. And I just was wanting a little bit of clarification about where that increase is coming from. Is it, because of the board being in a growth position, or is it more awareness and interest in, or is it pandemic related perhaps? So I didn't know if you had any insight about why the numbers are increasing.
Steph, do you mind if I start and then lean back over to you? So I think it's a yes and all of that. So I think there's a number of variables. So we know that as we continue to come through the pandemic, the stress on children, youth, families, staff has remained high. And so we spend a lot of time building confidence and competence that the greatest mental health strategy is actually a responsive relationship. So often too, educators will worry about not meeting the needs of their students. And so quite often we're putting the pause or that conversation in place to say the best strategy is actually to sit in relationship with your students and be responsive to them within your classroom. As Stephanie said, it's every employee, and then how we move through the tiers. And so I'm going to talk kind of about the two ends of pressure. So we will talk about a tiered model, all some few of supports for students. And so we look at those everyday conditions as Stephanie overviewed, and that's grounded in good relationship. And we'll talk about that further in another item as that comes up as well. And then when we come to the connect to, through, and from, more intensive mental health supports. Part of the privilege in my portfolio is also a superintendent of our day treatment programs. And so we are second only provincially to Toronto in the number of programs offered. We opened our 50th classroom in September across 15 partners. So that speaks to, and that's not 50 in sequence, that's 50 up and operational currently today in Durham region. And some of those programs have provincial reach, such as Ontario Shores, and some of them are more locally based, such as Kinnerk and Frontenac, serving students more within region. But what we're seeing is the impacts of staffing shortages in regulated health professionals. So I would say that our partners actually have fewer resources to offer families in Durham Region today than they did prior to the pandemic. So for example, and I'm not a regulated health professional, Stephanie is, so I'm going to do it kind of in what I refer to as BEd speak, and then Stephanie will clean it up for me if I'm incorrect or messing it up a bit. But so in order for one of the programs to run with front staff, such as child and youth workers, those child and youth workers require clinical supervision from somebody with qualifications such as Stephanie's, a master's in a related field such as social work, divinity. There's a lot, right, that sit in that space of that master's program. Many of our partners have unanswered postings for jobs in those positions. And so they're not able to offer the clinical programs. And so the way that they need to do it is to scale the available seats. And when children and youth who require intensive community-based supports, because our supports are for educational access, and this will be a conversation that comes up many times through SEAC, is the pressure of education as supports for educational access. And then we turn to our community partners for more of that intensive therapeutic relationship. Where they're not able to support, that child or youth is still coming through the door of the school every day. And we still need to wrap around them with care. And somebody such as myself or Anthony or Rima, as a Bachelor of Education, we are not qualified and do not want to tip into a clinical relationship or world with a student, but the student's needs are still there as a child or youth with mental health needs. So I find our teams are being kind of pinched from both sides, where we're building and fostering competence and confidence in relationships being the most foundational strategy for mental health for children and youth, gaps in community service, and the kids come into the buildings and our staff get called on. We will say as well that this is the first school year, and I've been fortunate to be in the department quite a while in a couple different roles. This is the first year that shortages in healthcare staffing are actually hitting us as a district as well. And so as we see unfilled rates in our community partners, we've had a few postings that we are now on third or fourth round of putting out for offers, as well as illness rates amongst staff from a physical health perspective and otherwise. And so that also adds to the team pressures and service as well. So just lots of variables. I don't know if that totally answers your question, Liz, or if Stephanie can augment that, but I do worry about the well-being of our own teams and the well-being of school staff, because everybody wants to do well by kids and their families. And certainly the complexity of the needs have gone up as well. So we're seeing kids stay on service longer, or students be re-referred for services as their needs change as well. And we want to be responsive to that. So lots of pressure points across all of the layers of service. I don't know, Steph,
that was great, Andrew. And the only other thing I would add is that because our community service wait lists are so long, as our staff work with students, instead of being able to sort of transfer the continuity of care to our community agencies, of which if they're not there, then we're continuing to hold and provide space for those students while new students are coming to our attention. And so that creates a bit of a pressure point on caseloads. So that may be one factor as well to why the numbers look higher. We're taking more kids on, but we're not transferring kids to community because the community has their own pressures and are not able yet to take them.
Thanks, Liz. Are there any other questions before we return back to Hannah? Kelly, go ahead.
Hi, yes, Stephanie. My question was around, there's like a lot of information and I'm not sure where I fell in with some of the info, but I just wanted to know about like the staff. I don't know if that was for the other section, but it was mentioned about like trainings and opportunities for professional learning opportunities. I'm just wondering, so is that kind of integrated in this new plan in a way where it's not it's not mandatory, but it's just additional trainings for staff to, for support, or are there going to be some mandatory trainings going forward because of this new demand?
Steph, do you want me to start? No. Okay. Professional learning is engaged in a number of different ways. And as a district, again, another shift. We've largely historically have focused training on half-day or full-day release. What we're really trying to emphasize is in-job coaching. So a lot of our district staff will be in classrooms alongside educators and alongside classroom support staff. And I'll talk about them just for a second. To do that job embedded alongside multiple kind of connections and point. It's similar to children's relationship with children. We know that developing a relationship and walking alongside somebody in their practice is the best way to shift learning and conversation. And so we're trying to do that. As a district, there are days of learning, such as our PA days, and who's engaged in learning and what activity they're engaged in. For staff such as our EAs, their behavior management systems, which is a system of proactive supports for students that consider factors around the child that impact on their programming needs, through to when we need a more intrusive response to a risk of injury behavior. That is mandatory within the collective agreement of our permanent EAs, that they have current certification in BMS training. And so that will always be a requirement. Foundational to the board, we have said our commitment is the Indigenous education policy, human rights, anti-racism, anti-discrimination policy, and safe and respectful workplaces. The mental health well-being action plan sits as that fourth partner to those documents. And so we're really trying to loop all PD to be, how does it link to those three policies in the plan? And we're learning to do that differently. So there is an interdepartment planning committee of which Stephanie sits on, to make sure that voice of mental health and well-being is always there in how are we doing, what are we focusing on, to make sure we don't go too wide to lose focus on those cores.
Thank you.
Great, thanks, Kelly. Any other questions? I do have one, and so Hannah, if you're all right, I'll have one question before we will do that. And I might only ask if you ask one more question now, if we've got others after. I'm just keeping mindful of the time and everyone's time commitments for the evening. So I will just wanted to sort of ask, saying, one of the things, Stephanie, and I guess it's still, again, follow on from Hannah's first question, was talking about sort of how do we know how we're doing? And we said, well, asking the students is a really great way of, taking that temperature to say, is what we're doing effective? Are we having the impact that we want? How are we layering in the complexity of our students who are nonverbal or who have cognitive issues that can't actually have those conversations? How are we going to help and measure those children? Because again, a lot of those kids are dealing with things and we don't even know, how are we going to layer all of that in on top of all of this?
So we learned a lot when we did the special education review a few years ago. We went out and did, we called them student voice sessions at the time. One of our alignments with the human rights and equity policy is challenging our use of the word voice as ableist to oral speakers. And so even in our language of how we frame getting student feedback is a practice that we're challenging ourselves. Superintendent Georgette Davis has the portfolio, which is included specifically of student feedback across all of our departments. And so on kind of that listening and learning tour, we're looking at how do you accommodate, right? And how do you, and honoring relationships in which the students may be able to amplify their feedback through, such as parents, caregivers, caring adults in schools. I would say we can, on the accommodation side for that, as well as Stephanie, I've talked a few times as well about who's in best position to give feedback in mental health and well-being, right? And so how do you access voices that are normally quiet because the system itself has caused barriers? So for instance, our students who are accessing through our partnership day treatment programs and accessing services, what would have been a supportive factor before that for them or contributing factor there? So it's hearing the traditionally unheard and accessing those voices. We're working on it. I don't think we've got a really, really good solution, but within Georgette's planning with her team, there are student groups specifically named in terms of being, we will not be comprehensive in listening to our students until across areas of identity, accommodation, and mental health needs. So I don't mean to remain vague. It's not, it's we're figuring it out. And that's something too that SEAC, if there's feedback or suggestions through any of the associations, we would very much welcome that in informing that plan.
Great. Sounds good. Hannah?
Okay, great, Tara. Thanks. And that was one of my questions. So in terms of, how are we getting feedback and how are we providing mental health supports around our nonverbal students? And topping on that, I think the other question is, what are some of the ways you guys are hoping then to be able to work on the mental health and well-being related to identities for our students who are, have varying types of disabilities and not necessarily just a mental health condition, because I think, they live aside it. I think there's a lot of mixed messaging that happens for our students, whether it can be, we can have top-down messaging saying, all identities are valued and are appreciated, but then of course you experience microaggressions, you experience that ableism that happens, and then you're trying to deal with those in your day-to-day interactions. There's being able to educate our student body and creating global citizens who really, beyond the teachers and the individuals that are staff. What about the building of community? So I think that's some of my feedback. You may already have plans around that and would welcome. And so it's a part question, part feedback.
Maybe I can start this one, and Andrew, you can pick it up. Hannah, I'll give you two examples where work is happening to move away from ableistic practices. So one is I support a team of child and youth workers that go across classrooms and support students in enhancing their skills around social emotional learning, things like stress management, managing and understanding emotions, healthy relationships. And we've been working with different partners across ISS to accommodate different aspects of the programming. Specifically, we're in one class right now where one of the things the staff do is they do a visual check-in around how are you feeling, and there's a series of images. It's either an emoji or it's one of those cute animals with the facial expressions. How are you feeling? And we've been working with some of the IS staff to create a Braille version for one of our students, so they're very much included in the check-in, and they themselves can choose and read and see from their perspective through Braille, find the emotion that resonates with how they're feeling that day. That's one example. Another example is in September, over the last several years, we have developed a resource called the First 20 Days. I think I may have mentioned that, or it may have been in a September SEAC report. And it's really an invitation for educators to begin to think about how are they starting the school year focused on connection, focused on relationship building. And we actually worked with some staff and really did a deep dive examination around ableistic language, wanting to ensure that the exercises and the language in which we invited people to do some of these activities weren't grounded in neurotypical development, but they were looking at all kids and all abilities. And so that's a second example of really trying to move beyond more ableistic language to ensure that it is universal designed and inclusive of all learners.
And if I could just add one layer to that too, I think an important shift that we've made in service recently is that historically we've had one of each of the practicing fields assigned to a school. So for instance, a school, Anthony L.U. Shores, Pickering High School, would have a lead from psychological services, a lead from speech, social worker, and a facilitator. And any of the students that came up as a service referral within that building, and then hearing and vision were needed for the kids, any student within that school community that came up in wanting service would be served by the members assigned to that school. Where we've made a shift is to understand more about the importance of situating within identity community for our kids, particularly around mental health needs and offering voice and choice. And so sometimes, such as when we've had incidents of racial slurs in classrooms, for example, the response team has shifted, understanding that when kids need support, sometimes that is best situated with someone who has a shared identity with them. And so giving that voice and choice. And then as staff shared with the plan, we look after student mental health and well-being, and we look after staff mental health and well-being. So as we call on staff to serve in different ways, and also bring their whole self into the service for kids, Stephanie, Carolyn, and Sarah, along with the team, have really made sure that there's affinity spaces for the staff and low impact debriefs for the staff that are available to them and supports. And we also call on ourselves as a white cis hetero leader to make sure that we're positioning our work differently. So if we're called on staff to do that kind of work, what are we going in as white allies to remove from their plates and workloads to do that reshift? And so that it's a collaborative focus of the focus of service on the kids, but not at the cost of staff members as well, that we're taking that collaborative team approach. So we're trying to really be identity affirming and responsive to our kids and the staff that serve them. Over the next year, I'd love to bring more members of our team here to talk about their practice. It is honestly quite an immense privilege to work alongside the staff that I do and that staff does. Incredible in their passion for kids. And it is through staff voice that we've been able to honor and make those practice shifts, which I think are really, really important.
Great. Thanks, Andrea. In the interest of time, what I'll say, Stephanie, thank you. This has been amazing. Looking really forward to seeing a lot of the good work that you're putting in place here. Just judging by the number of questions alone from us, you have our ear, and I think I'm going to assume that would it be okay? We'll put you on the agenda next year when we get a little bit further down the road at some point and bring things forward. If anyone, so you're still looking for additional feedback from SEAC, I guess funnel it through Lisa, I guess is probably the best, easiest way. So if anyone has any suggestions, comments, feedback on how to include into for the mental health action plan, please do send your comments and feedback input into Lisa, and she can consolidate and send over to Stephanie. So thank you. That was absolutely fantastic. All right. Where are we on the agenda? We are with that moves us on to item number 11, our open discussion periods, timed session.
Sarah Baker, may I make a suggestion about that?
Yes, I was going to ask.
Okay, thank you. So members will have received in your agenda package a copy of what looks like a poster called Special Education Supporting Many Paths to Success. I'm just going to hold one physically up because I managed to bring it home with me. It's big. Oh, sorry, I should unblur. It's purple, blue, and green on the boxes, and we'll resend it as well. We were bringing this forward hoping for small group breakout conversations, and I think it would be best. I see Hannah and Elizabeth nodding because I think we get a really great flow of feedback and conversation when we can break out into small groups and then come back as SEAC. And so if you don't mind me giving just a 2-3 minute history on what it is and what we're kind of thinking, and then if we can make it the open discussion in January, where hopefully we'll all be back together and can do that small breakout. I think that would be important if that's an agreement of SEAC.
So we have seen this before, if I recall correctly.
So the history on the document is that under the Education Act, boards are required to outline their process for individual placement and review committees, so IPRC. It's the process by which a student is formally identified as a student with exceptionalities or accommodation needs, and involves their placement, so either regular class or a special education placement. The first version of this document that existed for many years was called the Pathway to IPRC. And SEAC, you're right, Tara, we revised this not that long ago. So about, I think, just before COVID hit, we did come through a fairly significant revision on it. And so what we had found at that time was when we called a document a Pathway to IPRC, the identification and formal status as a student with special education needs seemed to be a thread within the conversation. And what it negated was that you can accommodate for any student, and in front of that, universal design sets up best practices for inclusion. So where we had a process that said Pathway to IPRC, the momentum kind of became that was the goal. And what we wanted to do was make a shift, that it was actually the program, universal design, accommodation, and then moving through those considerations that was process. And so through feedback, largely through SEAC and our administrators and our special education resource teachers, it was retitled in terms of many paths. And that's a document you'll see in your package. And it walks through what happens when kind of there's that initial sign that the program's not yet meeting the student's full needs. And that was another shift in the document. So the Pathway to IPRC said student not yet meeting with success. And the shift to the version you see now is program not yet meeting student needs. So switching that onus on, it's the program that needs to be responsive to the student. When we took a look at it this fall, and again, this document's only about 2-3 years old in its current version, with the learning that we've done around Indigenous rights, human rights, and equity, there's a lot on it that our team wants to change again. So I think it's a really good example of a grow forward. So for instance, going back to something Stephanie said, the first step is that the teacher assesses the strengths and needs of the student. And we think the first step should probably be educator forms a relationship with the student in order to understand their strengths and gifts and programming needs. We know that language such as student profile needs to shift because there's that association with policing and profiling that we want to move away from. We've also changed our consent process. So we used to say consent for service. And there was the challenge with that is that individuals such as myself, Rima, and Anthony as BEds cannot actually gain informed consent from guardians and students. It must be the person who's receiving the service with the service delivery professional. So we've shifted that to a referral for service, and then our clinicians pick up and get the informed consent. So we need to update that language. We'd also like to reflect that in-classroom coaching that came as an answer to Hannah's question around professional development, I believe. And that's not yet reflected in there as well. So we know there's some things that we want to shift already, which I think speaks to the growth of the district and our learning. And SEAC was incredibly important in the revision of the last version. And so we would like to bring it back to you for consultation at this time as well. So we know what's missing, kind of some of those front end pieces around self-determination, voice, choice being amplified, sitting in relationship. And then, as I said, there's just some language tweaks. We're also in the process of changing our special education software, and it's named in the, so there's some housekeeping items, but there's also some really foundational shifts that are needed. And we don't know what we're missing. So those are just the things that our leadership team has picked up on. but we'd really like your insights on what we're not yet seeing. And once you're able to provide that feedback, happy to. That's what happened last time at SEAC as well. I believe that's where we called out the program not yet meeting student not yet meeting with success, program not yet meeting student needs. Hannah, I believe that was your influence on the document at that point, which was really, really important. So if you're okay, we'd like to bring it back in January, break out into small groups, be able to answer questions about process. Michelle and Connor are both going to join us. So we have 2 district principals for inclusive student services. They're both going to come in January to SEAC, so that the 3 of us can support breakout groups, if that's okay. And let's carve into it and see where we need to grow it to in its next iteration, if that's okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably a really great idea. The last time we actually were in person, and the feedback, just Hannah's example from that, the feedback we got was worth it. Absolutely, it fostered a ton of information and discussion and great points and stuff. So it's not the same on Zoom and in virtual, which we absolutely 100% recognize. So if that's okay, yeah, let's move that to. We will table that for this month, and then we will move back to that and we'll add that to the January session. Thank you. My brain stopped there for a second. All right, then. No other questions or comments? Then we will move to item number 12, business arising from the minutes, the SEAC survey. And the handbook update. Andrea, do you have anything to?
Sure. So the survey, I believe, is now complete with SEAC feedback, but we'll do that calling once, calling twice for last. If you could if there's any further feedback tonight, that's great. And if not, if you could send it to Lisa and I prior to the holidays, that would be good to consolidate. We're just consulting with our assessment, our accountability and assessment department, to make sure when in timing, but did hear feedback from SEAC around it, make sure that we're in tune with a time where it would be important for parents and caregivers to be looking at IEPs and conversation that way. So we don't yet have the date frame. We're just trying to off-center it from a couple other, we don't want to overwhelm families by double surveying at any point of time. But I think it's pretty good to go. So for those that are new to the table, unless another SEAC member wants to speak to it, in the past, it's been quite robust in terms of what's being asked for. And through conversation last spring and into this fall, our assessment and accountability office came and said, what is it you hope to gain at the end of the survey? What do you hope that the information will tell you? And the SEAC table at that time felt that the most important information would be what's going really well in the system as trends, and what are some areas that we need to pay attention to, and for SEAC to provide greater guidance on in conversation and department planning. So the surveys focus largely on just those things. So what's going really well, and what do we need to be aware of in terms of improvements? And the focus this year is largely on communication, both with school teams as well as our inclusive student services staff. But if I'm missing anything, any of those that are a few more minutes at the table, can add that to the conversation. But we really wanted to honor the fact that for some of our families, time is an extremely precious quantity. And so we wanted to make sure that all of the families of students who receive services or supports would be in a position to respond, should they choose to.
Great. All right. So we can look for that. As well as the other item was our SEAC handbook, and that's coming from PAC on SEAC. Review its time to continue that every year. Andrea, do you want to?
Yeah, and I apologize because the members new at the table are going to think that I do all the talking, and I don't, I promise.
No, I'm relying you on this one. So
my goal really is to come listen to all your wisdom and provide information that you're seeking. So my suggestion would be if I can highlight a couple things from the handbook in its current iteration. And then I would suggest that we don't do a presentation in January, and we actually have 2 discussion periods, one on the poster we just discussed and one on the handbook. so that you've got time to sit together in conversation and kind of give feedback. So in November, SEAC committed to reviewing the handbook for SEAC. And so you have it within your package. There's a couple things that jump out. And I'm not a member of SEAC, I'm support to SEAC, so up to you. The commitment to Indigenous education policy, human rights, anti-discrimination, anti-racism would not be part of this document yet, given the date of its publication. And so a suggestion would be to center that commitment in the revision to the document. The accessibility of the document would be important, as I don't believe it would pass AODA currently, given font style and a couple things. The call to address ableism in the medical model might be something else that SEAC would consider embedding as important for this cycle of SEAC in the next couple of years. It also struck me that there seems to be a couple different processes right within the handbook. There's guidelines, but there's also a resource section. So SEAC may want to consider pulling those apart and having something structured more like guidelines and bylaws of how SEAC functions and the legislation behind SEAC in one part, and then having a resource guide and support. And then I think a lot of reflection points over the last year have been on how do we do a better job of supporting new members to SEAC? So given that I believe there's at least half a dozen of SEAC members currently at the table that are in first meeting and or under a year at the table, you will have incredible voice on what would be helpful to you or would have been helpful to you. And so the suggestion would be to amplify the new to SEAC information that's part of the handbook as well. So just food for thought, but it is important. SEAC's a very collaborative table and very engaged. The guidebook and the regulation for kind of what governs your work together, you don't need it until you really need it in terms of navigating when there's tricky things that come up and or things like quorum, membership. SEAC has dealt with recently whether or not we would have funded services at the table or fee for services at the table rather. And so things like that are important to have in so that you've got a document of commitments that you can point to guide your work together in consultation to the board.
Thanks, Sandra. I'd also add that when I first joined, which was not nearly as long as some members that have sat around this table, that handbook was probably close to over a couple hundred pages. I think at one point it was 400 pages long, and we have since said that's too much information for any one human possibly could absorb. And a lot of it was repetition from what we had in the special education planning book and that sort of thing. So we have distilled it down to a lot more pertinent, salient information about SEAC in general. But it is still 48 pages long. So there is some parliamentary procedure type stuff in there as well. So for anybody new reading this, we're sorry. But it's important information because it's still part of our our governance of how we run the process. So it's important to know.
An option would be to situate it within small group conversation in January, and then potentially have a subcommittee take it away, draft a document with staff support. Happy to put whatever resources you need behind that, okay, and then bring a draft back. I think if you use exclusively only SEAC meeting times to revise the document, you'll get logged down in a time crunch for other things. Yeah. So that would just be, again, respecting the fact that I'm staff support to SEAC, not a member of, for your consideration as a committee.
Any thoughts, comments?
I agree. I think probably forming a subcommittee sounds good. And to your points, Tara, I think, it's good to make it salient and relevant, and what are the key pieces to it, and perhaps, updating the resources section as well in terms of, what are some other supplemental documents that we want to ensure that the new members have an access to. I think our resources have a lot of different services, but what about the key relevant documents that we want to ensure that people have had a chance to read that are pertinent to our role?
That's a good point, Hannah. Any other comments? Okay, well, I guess we can add this as an agenda item then for the January meeting then as well. So we'll do that. So we'll have lots of talking in January. So be prepared. Bring your water bottles, everybody. So that will be those. Sorry, I'm still just looking through that. Okay, if there's no other comments or questions, we'll move on to the next item. Association reports and committee reports. Did we get any association reports? No, not this time. Okay. Just a reminder, if you wanted to bring something for your association, please do submit to Lisa ahead of time. So then we can include it with the meeting notice and agenda for that month's meeting. Item 14, correspondence. We have a few things here. So we have the SIP letter, which I think we've talked about quite a few times. For those who are new to the process, we like writing letters here. No, one of the things that we have been strong advocates for here on SEAC is sort of one of the pieces of our funding formula is we do have an aspect of the budget, and Andrea, please do correct me where I messed up acronyms or information. We do get a bundle of funding called the SIP with special incidents portion, I believe. And we it's really meant for specific funding to support our students that require 2 or more full-time staff to support educational access for them. It is an application process, so we actually have to provide the appropriate relevant documentation and so there's a very large governance around it, and it's I believe the staff can attest that it's quite a labor intensive process to do it. We have quite a large number of actual applications that we have every year. The challenge is I think we're hovering ridiculously low. I can't remember the exact number that each application would receive. It's 32. No, I don't think that's right. 28. Oh, good Lord. $28,000 per application. Where that the cost of actually supporting our students with with our SIP claims, a minimum 2 staff. Think about the staffing and the salaries just to support just the 2, let alone any additional resources or support tools or anything else like that. The funding is abysmally low. So we write a lot about the lack of support that funding has happened. And in this last year, the original budget had promised an increase. And then after the election, that increase had been clawed back as well. So on top of sort of some promises of some additional funding, we had some of that clawed back. So that's really what the intention of this letter was, just to continue to highlight and address that that funding is not anywhere near to adequate. So Andrea, please add.
Thank you. I think you did an excellent job. So just for those new to committee, so it allows us to reclaim funding already expended. So the support is already in place in our schools. So for Trustee Miller and Trustee Oldfield, when you go into the budgeting process, our anticipated revenue, because you'll do money in and money out and that balance. So we put a projection of how many claims we will be submitting into budget planning. So this year it was just over $3.1 million to be anticipated as a claim back at this time. And then, as Tara said, staff engage in a process consent-based with families to submit in order to reclaim. So you can imagine the work that goes into $3.1 million reclaimed in just under $29,000 bundles in terms of that. So staff is currently, I'll be signing off on them next week and submitting to the ministry. We're sitting around 104 currently for the district in terms of how many claims are going to be submitted, but you will see that come through the budgeting process as an anticipated revenue, and then we always balance across realized timetables in schools. Terry, I think you're on mute.
Let's get off mute. That would be helpful to complete this. So I think we are in our fifth or sixth or seventh revision of this. So I think we are at this point, we are good to go.
I believe it went and it was provided for
so
copy.
it went. That's right, because Trustee Oldfield had said that she had included it in our conversation with Patrice at the OPSPA. So thank you very much. So that is sort of, I think, so that the one attached in the agenda or with the agenda on Lisa's note is the final draft that we have sent. So that's great. Fantastic. Other correspondence we have is our name change, which we referred to earlier, Black's Parent Support Group. Sorry, and Jen, sorry, I'm so sorry, how did we pronounce that? Name change? Sabona?
Hi, 1 second. Hi. Hi, yes, we've done a name change for the group. To make it a little bit more reflective of a bigger demographic instead of just one specific group. So it incorporates more of the Afrocentric group instead of just Black people.
Great. Okay. Point of order, as they're already a member on the table, this does not need approval. It's just inform for our folks. Okay, great. That's fantastic. So we'll make sure that that gets updated. Have we updated the brochures with everything? Okay, so then we will re-update with the...
Lisa's already made the update.
Hey, Lisa, you're amazing. Thank you. All right, so then that will be a current. So then we have that. And then the last one is a letter from, where are you? Sorry, the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board's age. So I have not had a chance to read this. Andrea, did you?
I can give a bit of a framework.
Synopsis on that.
Yeah,
so if it's in the meeting minutes and folks.
Very fair.
Thank you.
So historically and by practice, boards of education serve up to the age of 21. The reference in the Education Act is to student funding. It switches at that time from a comprehensive student rate to a continuing education rate. So prior to the pandemic, there was the occasional family inquiry about remaining in the school system post-21. During the pandemic, we certainly saw an increase to those discussions with families as students would not have had the year anticipated in terms of first year of priority pandemic or now. And then we also see a pressure around adult services. And so I think what's coming forward from the Dufferin Peel Catholic School Board is an acknowledgement of that conversation and a sought conversation around that. The GTA boards, so the boards Toronto and Wraparound, are consistent in practice, in which we do not register a student for a second school year in which the calendar year that they turn 21. So similar to how at a younger end, students turn 4 before JK, but we do have some 3-year-olds starting JK because they have a fall birthday. We mirror that as students turn 21. So this June, all the 2002 babies will graduate and either move on to work education, adult programming, variety of services, or post-secondary. And we'd be planning for the 2003 babies to be graduating and finishing a year in June 2024. So it's just some pressure points around that, both mainly for the families in terms of that. In terms of the differentiated experience during COVID, our adult service partners are aware of that and have adjusted their programming, knowing what the kids have and the young adults at that point have experienced. And so we have held to that and continue to hold to that in education. So the letter, I believe, is an invitation to discussion around that conversation. It is a significant year for the young adults and their families. And we certainly do appreciate that as well.
Okay. Any comments or discussion around the correspondence? Seeing none, okay. Then let's move on to the next agenda item, and that will be any community concerns that people would like to bring up from their associations. Liz.
Yeah, so I have a community concern which arose just based on personal experience and that of my son. But I wanted to mention it at this table because I think it raises some more general issues, and I'm going to try and not speak to specifics in his case, but more of what I see as the broad issues. What happened in our family was that my son is in grade 8 in the self-contained gifted program, and we found that this is a very natural point to evaluate placement within that program for the next year for high school. The nature of the gifted program changes quite a bit at the high school level. And so there were some questions that come up about whether or not to continue in that type of program. And in his case, it meant a choice of 2 different schools, whether he returned to mainstream in his local high school or whether he would go to the gifted program in a different high school. I can also see that there may be some kids who have been identified as gifted and elected to do their elementary school in their local mainstream programs and may also reach this transition point and want to evaluate what's going to be the best next step just because of how the program is changing. Now, my son was requiring some support and information to help him to make the best choice possible and help him feel comfortable. And I have to be honest, it wasn't really a surprise to me that I had to ask for what he needed and wanted. But then I think what I was surprised about was that I met some resistance and some perhaps not full understanding about what the choices were and why he was at this transition point. And I think that that's an area that could be better supported. And we've spoken at this table so much about supporting our kids through transitions that particular group seems to have been forgotten about and maybe misunderstood a little bit. So I wanted to just raise that point here.
Yeah, Andrea?
Thank you. I'm sorry that was his experience, Liz, and yours. I do know that Michelle followed up with both schools in that regard too, because you are absolutely correct. Any students that avail themselves of a placement within a special education program, including the gifted program, always have a right to their homeschool and regular class placement. And so when students are at one of the 4 secondary host sites for gifted, we should be cognizant and offering opportunities for the open houses and connection points at both their homeschool and the program school. So rightful advocacy, and Michelle did follow up as principal lead for that program, as well as the schools in that area as well. So she did take that up. And then I think our learning is to make sure that through November, as we start to approach grade 8 transitions, that we include that as specific language as reminders out to our special education heads at each of the secondaries to make sure they're being inclusive of invitations. I don't know, Anthony's online and is at one of the gifted host sites. I don't know, Anthony, I don't want to put you on the spot, but if there's anything you wanted to add, you're more than welcome.
Hi, yes. If you have specific questions about the program in place at the secondary school, you're always welcome to reach out. If it's our school, you're welcome to reach out to me or to whichever school it is. They may be the best place to answer specific questions about the program itself.
Great. Thank you. Are any other community concerns?
I have one.
Sir? Jen, then Hannah.
I am not sure if this has been, sorry, addressed in the group before, but the group that I'm representing, they're discovering that a lot of the parents aren't available of the resources of the SEAC committee. So they were wondering if at the beginning of the school year, there could be some material or some more highlights to let parents know that there is a support group for them. Another issue that was mentioned in our meeting was how is there a measurement to know if once we've placed our concerns, how it's going to be addressed? What kind of feedback would be given to the families in our group?
So I think the first question is yours, the second is mine. Is that okay? Jen, is that all right?
Yeah, that's fine. Sorry.
Sorry, who's going first?
I think you are on the SEAC, the invitation to maybe think about the start of the school year and information.
Jen, you've hit upon the $64,000 question that we have been trying for years to remedy. One of the reasons why we're doing the SEAC survey, one of our mandates that we've been trying the last couple of years is how do we get the name of SEAC out and have parents really truly be aware of what SEAC is. I think we still even have teachers that don't really know what SEAC is and what SEAC does and what SEAC brings to the table. I do know that we do provide information to the CERTs and to the schools. I think that's part of knowing how to get that information out to families that would need it. So Andrea, I'm not sure if that's sort of a reiteration of that through the schools to say there's lots of things available and sort of highlighting to parents as they're coming through. That's been one area that we've done, but definitely that, Jen, that for sure, if there's other ways that would be helpful that you can think of to get that information out, we've tried multiple times through the years. So I know that's probably something that's probably got to come back up onto our radar again as a committee to say, how do we continue getting through that? So yeah, go ahead.
And I'm not pointing any fingers here, but for example, my son was in special education for the past few years. And how I found out about this committee is not through the CERT. To be honest with you, it was being involved in another committee, being involved in the parental involvement committee. So maybe there could be some discussions with the CERTs in the schools to push this information more forward to members of the communities. And an example of this can also be given. I'm not sure if members of the committee saw an email that was sent by a parent of a Pickering school last month after we had this meeting here, saying that she didn't even know that the SEAC was available and she was so stressed finding the supports for her child. So that's also probably confirmation that information regarding the groups need to really be out there for the parents, and the CERTs are not all the CERTs are giving the information out in the schools.
No, we've hit on that multiple times, Jen, where we've been keep going through that. So I think we have to keep going. Like we can't give up and keep getting that information out. So part of our role as agencies and community groups at the table is promoting from within as well and getting our word out through that process as well. That's, you know, sort of the word of mouth, and eventually we'll get there. So as you as well, since now you know about us, you can help promote what we do and all the good work and that we're doing too. So that is for sure an additional way to go through that. And then if more people start asking the schools about that, because more and more people hear about it, then maybe we'll kind of close that feedback loop, which hopefully we'll keep going through that. But definitely, I think that might be something we want to maybe bring up again, saying maybe it's time to start talking about some of the items, to think how do we increase the profile, as it were, of SEAC again. So we had a few ideas, and then pandemic shut us all down. So maybe it's time to start talking about that again. We'll chat with Eva and see if we can get something somewhere on an agenda, because it is important, Jen. Like, we do a lot of really good work here. We've got a lot of great people around the table with a lot of great ideas and a lot of passion. Let's see what we can do for that as well. Sensor Renab, I see your hand up.
Thank you, Jen, for bringing this question forward. As you know, on the committee, we've been working hard at that. And I would just like to put a motion forward that we do look at this starting maybe March, April, so that we have a good plan in place for September, so that we can use things like informing our certs to make sure that the brochure, the SEAC brochure, goes out with the information package. But also because I sit on the PIT committee as well as a representative for SEAC, they have a newsletter that goes out 4 times a year and have a great reach towards parents as well. And I'm wondering if we could partner with them to make sure that the information is included all 4 times the newsletter goes out.
Those great suggestions, Spencer. Absolutely. Any other comments? Hannah?
And I'm aware of how much time we have, so I just wanted to bring the community concern. I think it piggybacked well to the comment about the what's the term again? The education qualifications, right? And especially to the one around the limited resources around vision supports. And so I think we are definitely hearing that in the community about families who do need vision supports, and the gaps in that, and then the ability of the teachers without vision support and consultants to be able to assist. And I think on a larger scale as well, really the idea of the right to read and math acquisition skills, I think that's continuing to be on the forefront for our community, especially of within Easter Seals families, is that, you know, sometimes once our children get into special education classes, the reading and the academic and the curriculum pieces can sometimes go to the side. And so just really continuing to want to bring that, and this is across Ontario, so this is not necessarily specific just to Durham, but as Easter Seals families, we are advocating for that. And then just on a side note, we are also advocating for some increased access for ADP, for accessibility and some needs there. And so that's just more of I'm sliding in an association update there.
No, really, really, really good points, Hannah, for sure. Any other items to bring forward? Community concerns been hearing? No? All right then. Some great stuff. Andrea, if we've got some things to add to some agendas for the new year.
Yeah, that's really appreciated and important feedback.
Yeah, no, that will be great. Yeah, that'll be great. That'll form some really good conversations in the new year. So it'll be fantastic. Okay, then let us move on to item number 16. Any celebrations or successes anyone would like to share? I have no Adam stories this time around. Sorry, guys. Okay, we have none. Oh, Senator Renab. Yes, sorry, I didn't see you there.
No worries. I'd just like to give you guys an update. So I did come back from my trip from Ghana, and I spent one day with a center called Hope Setters Autism Center in Tema, Ghana. It was a great day. There was things that I did notice that were different about the general population of children diagnosed with autism that are different from our children here. Most children gave eye contact. Most children responded to their name. But there was still all the direct signs and signals of autism with those children as well. In that country, they are still at the bringing awareness to inclusion. So there is no funding, governmental funding support for children with autism. There are for identified disabilities like hearing and vision, but not for autism, which means that if you have a child going to school who cannot academically perform, you have to remove them and put them in a specialized center, and you have to pay out of pocket for that. At the center, they did have a an occupational therapist, and they have speech and language support as well. In my interactions in the day and talking with management, we talked a lot about possibly some training opportunities, capacity building workshops that we already have formulated that we could possibly be doing through Zoom calls with them. They're also looking at inclusion. And of course, I mentioned starting a coalition with the other autism centers so that they can petition the government for more inclusionary practices. So Andrea, I do have a video that I've put together of my day at Hope Centers. I will be sharing it with Lisa Rye with everybody's permission, and then you guys can watch the video. But Andrea, I'm going to be asking for your time just to see what we can do to partner here and get the people the support they need. I call them Hope Setters, giving hope to those that need it the most.
That's fantastic, Senator. That yeah, I'll look forward to seeing that for sure. Please do add that in. That'll be really neat to see. Any other celebrations or successes you want to share? No? All right then, our next SEAC meeting is scheduled for January 19th. I think that's a typo. Should that be 2023 instead of 2022?
And just for those who are new to the table, Lisa does kindly arrange for some beverages and a light dinner in case you're coming from other settings and don't have that chance to stop in. When we're in person, there is always some food to avail yourselves of.
It is very much appreciated. Especially those coming straight from work. So, all right then. Then I will ask for a motion to adjourn. Hannah, second. Senator Renab, all in favor? All right then. We will see everybody in the new year. Have a safe and happy holiday, and enjoy lots of yummy treats and beverages and food and laughter and friends. We'll see everybody in the new year. Cheers.